Okay, so I am recording on the 28th of July, and that means I've done 22 days fasted so far, working on day 23 today. Things are going pretty good. The bad taste in my mouth kept getting less and less, so it's still been there some, mostly like in the middle of the night I was noticing it some, and the night before, same thing, but a little more the night before, so every day a little less, and that's nice. Still a little bit of that fatigue of like when you do feel it, you just feel like, oh, I'm so tired of this, but it's okay, no big deal. Still getting various symptoms, but most of the most unpleasant ones I'm not getting very much anymore. So still had all this sinus stuff, which is not from the fasting, it's from my exposure to the water damaged building I live in. So there's tons of things going on in my sinuses regularly for years now. That's just the way it has been, and it's still going to be until I find a way to be able to move. But the fasting is impacting it somehow, and I'm surprised at how much. I've got really, it's hard to quantify how much, but what feels to me like a tremendous amount of lessening of that happening. So it's like there's a lot going on, but it means, a lot compared to if you didn't have the problem. Very little in comparison to how much it usually was. So I had a couple of days I had mentioned before at the beginning of the fast, I forget, 2, 3, 4 days, that I said I took Actifed. When I say that, I don't really mean Actifed like the brand name. Just in my 30s, I had a lot of this exact same thing. I can tell looking back over my own history that I've had this lifetime of in and out of these symptoms depending on where I lived, apparently. And looking back, that kind of fits. Like, oh yeah, I moved into such and such place, and then that was happening later and didn't get the thing. And all of it wasn't just moving in. Some of it was like a certain thing happened. The house we lived in when I was a child up until I was 12, I can remember that there was a time when we had a massive problem with our water heater and it kind of blew up or something. Anyway, it's hard to describe all that, but the memory is from my mom and dad were starting to work on it, and whatever happened, like a bunch of steam started blowing out of it and burned my mom. And so I was in the house and I heard her scream, and as a kid how that would affect you when you hear your mom scream in pain. That was a big deal. I've always remembered that. But anyway, things like that. So there's all these things in my life I look back and I'm like, well, around age 7 all this started, and then I look back at that water heater thing and I'm going, not like you can really trust my memory, but that might have been, I think that's kind of likely that the memories do fit together to say that those two things could have been, that could be when that house got contaminated in that way. Anyway, now, speaking of now, back to, I have all this stuff going on with my sinuses, and that is affecting the fast, making it different than any other fast I've had before, because this, theoretically any different water damaged building or any other kind of biotoxin I could have been exposed to in my life, they're not all exactly the same. And this one here is pretty bad, and or it's a pretty heavy exposure to it, or some combination of ideas like that. But I'm still not getting good sleep. I haven't gotten good sleep in years. That's rough. I could get a lot more healing if I could sleep. Sleep matters that much. But I gotta go interrupting myself. Sorry about that. Back to the Actifed thing. I'm in this problem. I took some Actifed early on in the fast. It's not brand name Actifed. It's from in my 30s when I was having this problem, and I just got used to saying Actifed a lot. And there were 2 medications over the counter that I found that I could use back then that helped with sinus pressure and making everything drain, which was Actifed and Sudafed. And at some point, and I guess it might have been even before I ever started getting healthy again, but I don't think so. I think it was later. So I started getting healthy, and then it was really rare I ever needed it. At some point years later, I had a day that I was super clogged up and getting a sinus headache, and found out you can't get it so easily anymore. But when I first started using it in my 30s, you just went in and bought what you wanted, and they were both available. And I don't remember if maybe they weren't always both at every store, or if there were price differences, or why I didn't always use the same one every time. I just don't remember. But I was using either Actifed or Sudafed way back then in my 30s, and I used them a lot in my 30s. And eventually had sinus surgery, which did a world of good for me at the time. It was so fabulous for me. Pretty wild to say from someone who trusts doctors as little as I do now. But that sinus surgery did me a lot of good, despite the fact that I'm sure those doctors also believed in some of the crazy, horrible things that other doctors have done to me. Then, like I said, at some point you couldn't get that stuff anymore very easily. I think it had to do with druggies. Of course, I wasn't ever buying it to bake up some other kind of drug in a lab, so don't have a chemistry lab in my house, except the kitchen and my baking I used to do. So that was no big deal because I had so many really good healthy years and I hardly ever needed anything like that. And then now lately, trying not to go back onto any kind of meds, even over the counter. I wasn't really using it when I needed it these last few years, but I did a little bit recently. And I had a little bit more and more just in the last year before that, maybe 2 years. So now I'm about to run out in my house, but I've said all that to say I did that again over this last weekend. Because today's Monday morning. Over the last weekend, I had a little bit. I think 2 different doses. I did not take any last night before bed, which would have been a time I would have needed one if I wanted an active dose for bed. And I did wake up in the middle of the night with some kind of bad sinus pressure for a minute. But again, all things are relative. I say bad, like it feels bad in combination. It feels bad in reference to what if I just didn't have it. But I've had way worse as far as how much sinus pressure and how painful that can get. So I just went back to sleep and didn't even get up and go get a dose. And I have still had some more draining, and I did not wake up with a migraine, so that was kind of awesome. Like I said, this fast is helping in some way, and I don't know what all it'll do, but I'm going to keep fasting and keep praying about it. And trying to put out these updates, that say, still fasting. Might get a little more attention than I want at some point. Hopefully not. Well, I shouldn't say hopefully not, as if I can't stand the attention, but that's not the purpose of this, to get attention. I noticed, because I was trying to look something else up, and the internet kept telling me there's video results. There's all kinds of people putting out fasting videos saying, I did no food for 3 days, and look what happened to my body. And I'm a little amused by all that. I'm like, okay, there's a lot you can do on your own to just learn to fast, that you won't die if you didn't watch all the clicky people that wanted you to see that they did that for 3 days. But now I am working on day 23, and it did kind of occur to me, I might get a little attention that way. That was a little scary, internet attention. The internet's a freaky place. But anyway, if people really are interested in fasting, yeah, it's hard to get good information out there, and I've looked for it too, so I understand there are some people looking for it. And whoever you are, if you're looking for fasting information and you found this, I love you, and I say God bless you. Y'all have a great day.